So let's restart. So we're pleased to have Leo Bursztyn now. Leo, have like 45 minutes.
Okay. It's not useful, so this paper is called Justifying Dissent. So thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure. This is joint work with Georgi Egorov from Northwestern, Ingar Halan from Bergen, Akash Rao, who's a PhD student at Harvard, and Chris Roth from Cologne. So let's get started. So I don't know what the protocol is today, but if you have questions throughout, feel free to interrupt. So the motivation of this paper is pretty simple. If you look throughout history, dissent is a powerful force, both for and against social change. And when you think, studying the context of dissent, many times rationales that could be supplied by political entrepreneurs, social movements, and the media often enable dissent by shaping the public debate. Okay? Just to pick a couple of recent examples, just where things have been salient in the political debate, on both sides of the political aisle, narratives that the police reform would increase violent crime have been used and disseminated to justify the opposition to the view that there should be police reform in the U.S. On the other side, among Republicans and conservative circles, people have relied and disseminated rationales and narratives that immigrants are violent criminals to justify opposing some types of immigration into the U.S. Okay, so just a couple examples of types of rationales that have been supplied and disseminated. Now the question is, why is it that these rationales facilitate or enable dissent? Okay, so the standard explanation, the standard account is a story of persuasion. I, had some opinion, and then I'm exposed to a rationale, some argument, and that changes my opinion. Perhaps I was supportive of immigration, and then I see some argument, some rationale that immigrants are criminals. That changes my mind. So I'll be more likely to express my dissent because I have been persuaded. Okay? Standard persuasion channel. But if you look at the data, dissent is often limited not due to a lack of support for the cause, but rather by people's fear of the consequences of expressing dissent. Okay, so if you look at recent survey data in the US, for example, 62% of Americans agree with the statement that the political climate these days prevents me from saying things I believe because others might find them offensive. Okay, so it seems that there's something beyond the lack of support for some causes, and rather also about condition of holding your opinion, you kind of discomfort expressing it publicly because of the political climate. Okay, so what we're going to study here is that we're going to propose and experimentally examine another mechanism, a mechanism of social cover, okay, by which rationales affect public behavior. So I'm going to motivate this with a couple examples, which are the ones I mentioned before, just to fix ideas. Think about the opposition to defunding the police. Okay, so in many settings, mostly in liberal circles, there are large social sanctions from expressing this view. Okay, so people might think that if you say, I don't think we should reform the police, or I don't think we should defund the police, people might attribute this position, your lack of support at this position, to a lack of support for racial equality. Say, Leo is against it. He doesn't support racial equality. Leo's a racist or something like that. Okay. Now, suppose that there's an argument that's popularized claiming that the police defunding will increase violent crime. Okay. So there's an argument and people are exposed to it. Now, people may now publicly oppose defunding the police due to one, persuasion, right? People's private opposition to defunding becomes stronger. Well, I changed my mind. This is a good argument. So I'm willing to pay the social cost. I'm more likely to be willing to pay the social cost because my opinion has changed. I feel more strongly about this. There could be a mechanism of anticipated persuasion. You think that some of your audience will be persuaded, and this will shape your social cost. Okay, that didn't really change my mind. I already was supportive of, I was already opposing defunding the police. But now I know that some other people will be persuaded, and that's going to change my calculus of the social cost, right? I'm going to be judged less harshly. Some people might be persuaded. Yes.
how should I be thinking about like this about the private type of forums, let's say anonymous, exchange of market, Reddit, and so on, where the cost is kind of minimal,
Yes.
and you can go ahead and say,
Yes, exactly.
Whatever
I'm thinking. Yes, I'm thinking about public expression of dissent, for example. And actually, a lot of the work experiments are going to be on Twitter, right, where things are less anonymous. But you're right. When you're thinking about more anonymous forums where people don't even know who you are, some of these things the next one are going to be less relevant, right? And it's going to be yes, but a lot of expression is observed, right? A lot of actions are observed. You know, if you want to join, sign a petition, you want to go out there and express your opinion, or you want to speak in a one-on-one conversation, you want to join a political protest. Many things are observed, right? And then we have the social cover mechanism here, which is the rationale opens up new explanation for their position, reduces the informativeness of the position to becoming at least for the underlying type. The idea here is that if I say this, people don't know that I've been exposed to a rationale, they're going to update on my type. They say, okay, he must be against racial equality. Now, if people know that I've been exposed to an argument, they say, well, maybe he was persuaded by this argument. Maybe he has a good reason to oppose it. I'll give him a pass. I'll change my inference about this person's type. So there's less informativeness of opposition itself for the underlying prejudice. Okay.
So do you have any model behind your mind? So like a social norm thing, you're seeing type.
Yeah.
You just say that, but you're gonna rely on some modeling to think of.
I'm not talking about the model today because for the interest of time and frankly, the contribution I think is mostly experimental. Yes, there's a model. You can think about a social signaling model where people are making inference about the type, conditional observed interaction, kind of the all type of framework, and then the informativeness of the action to infer your type is changed when you introduce kind of a rationale that people know you've been exposed to. So it's just changing the inference. Yes. Some people have been persuaded by it, but there's a chance that you were one of them, right? So are given a pass. So that's for the example on the liberal side. I think about a similar example on the conservative side. It's going to be quick here because it's very similar. You know, in some settings you might face sanctions for saying that you oppose immigration or express anti-minority views. People might think of you as a xenophobe or as a racist. Now suppose that there's an argument that is popularized claiming that immigrants commit more violent crime. You know, again, this might facilitate dissent for a number of reasons, including the social cover. People say, oh, maybe they believe this argument. Maybe they're persuaded. Maybe they're really worried about crime. Maybe they're not just racist, right? So it could actually serve as a social cover. So what we're going to study here is that we're going to run a number of experiments. I'm not going to have time to go through all of them. We have a total of 17 experiments we ran in this paper, and most of them on social media. And these experiments study the power and limitations of rationales in facilitating dissent. So I'm going to study on the liberal side, their willingness to publicly oppose the movement to defund the police. And on the conservative side, their willingness to publicly support the immediate deportation of all illegal Mexican immigrants. Okay, so I'm going to study these two positions and see what's going on both sides of the political aisle. We're going to isolate the social cover effect of rationales from these other mechanisms and other profounds, and we'll demonstrate its quantitative importance in the setting of social media. We also going to study the other side, the observer side, saying we show both how social cover facilitates the expression of dissent, but also how this changes the observer's inference about the motives behind dissent. Okay, so we're gonna do experiments on the other side of communication too. Okay, so since this is a shorter talk, I'm just gonna go quickly here. I'm gonna start with some experiments on the liberal side, both in terms of the expression of dissent and the interpretation of dissent by receivers in the model, by observers, and do the same thing on the conservative side. And then I'm going to show you, if you have time, a bunch of additional experiments with larger representative samples, and we can conclude and discuss some of the policy implications and extensions and so on. I think there are quite a few. All right. So this is an experiment that was all pre-registered. and ran in October of last year, and with a sample of just over 500 Democrats and independents with active Twitter accounts. Okay, so this is on the liberal side, okay? And social media is a natural setting to study dissent for a number of reasons. There's a not natural audience, you know, your followers, your friends, so people that you might care about, and it's natural audience. This is also a natural form of public expression. You know, people just post tweets, they write things on Facebook and so on. There's a number of readily available rationales that people naturally use. You can repost, retweet, you can tag, or just add a link or so on. And it's a setting of direct interest, right? As a lot of the public debate these days is on social media, so, and there's a lot of concerns about what's going on, what the policy implications are, so I think it's a setting of direct interest. So how do we actually study this? Because, you know, we wanted to do something that was more compelling than just asking people something, oh, do you support this, and so on. And, you know, we wanted it to be public, and we wanted it to be somewhat natural, okay? So, but we wanted to, therefore, to have a reviewed preference measure of the willingness to publicly dissent, okay? So our measure was a person's willingness to post a tweet expressing support for a campaign opposing defunding the police, okay? Now, we faced a challenge here because we wanted this to be reviewed preference, actually something that resembles an actual decision with real costs, but we also wanted to, we didn't want to actually contribute to start a political campaign. We just didn't want to get a bunch of people to start posting something and maybe create a whole campaign on Twitter. That wouldn't be like ideal in terms of ethics, right? So we had to work around that, and our solution was, instead of asking people to post something, we asked them to download an app that we created. It has a pretty shitty name, Tweetability, which, you know, doesn't matter. And so they download this app when they join the experiment, and this app allows us to schedule a post on the Twitter account on their behalf. So they had to authorize us, you know, to post this tweet, right? And I'll describe a little bit more. Sorry. This is moving. Yes. Well, they could say no. You know, it's an outcome. Well, they are paid to participate in the experiment. Yes. So we asked them to post this tweet. And what we did is we said, all the tweets will be posted when and if we reach survey respondents in all counties, okay? Now, this is a condition that we knew we were never going to reach, because we knew we were going to survey about 500 people, and there are more than 500 counties in the US. So this is a condition that we, the researchers, knew we were not going to be able to reach, but the participants didn't know. So there is a tension here. There's some... I'll wait for...
Working? Yes? Okay. I just probably I missed when you said it. But what about the situation? I don't care at all about that. But I know that if I will not, basically not tweeting anything, it means like tweeting the opposite.
I see. So
because again, I hear these are random people, but you know, I go all the, you see these groups, everybody know everyone, they try to enforce one another, and I feel if I will not do, I'm expected to do that. You miss this here when you have a random sample of people.
Yeah, I mean, we're focusing, we're giving people the opportunity to make a statement in something, but no one knows that you had the opportunity, right? There's no, and you stayed silent, for example. Yes, so we don't have this by design. I agree with you. I think it's super interesting, actually, how people interpret silence, right? In fact, I was trying to run some experiments on WhatsApp. It was like, if you stay quiet, how are people going to interpret your silence and so on? I think that's an interesting question.
So precisely because of that, I don't want to play this game, but I think that's what's going on.
But I think it's part of what's going on. I agree with you. So basically here, we told them that this will be posted if we reach this condition. Participants did not know that this condition was a condition we're not hoping or planning to reach. And we told them they will be deleted if not yet posted by a certain date, okay? So if we don't reach this target. Okay, so eventually, so no tweet was posted. You know, they were not told about that. So every participant was provided with a rationale. So the rationale was an article written by a Princeton criminology professor arguing that defunding the police increases violent crime. So this is a piece that was published in the Washington Post, an opinion piece by this Princeton criminology professor, showing the data, okay, about the scientific consensus that defunding the police increases violent crime. Now, this is a very, very good rationale, very credible. This is by a professor at Princeton criminology professor on the Washington Post, which is a pretty liberal outlet with scientific evidence, right? Our paper? No, it's not a co-author.
You're lying to them.
No, it's a real article. I'll show you I'll show you it.
Oh, I thought you were going to lie. Okay,
No, I'll show you. So after showing this, it's a link with the actual published article, like in the Washington Post. And then after they see it, they choose whether to privately join a campaign, right? To oppose defunding the police. So they showed it, and they make the private action. Those who join the article, join the campaign are shown the article a second time, okay? Then choose, after seeing the second time, whether or not to post a tweet with a petition to oppose defunding the police. Now, I'm going to show our experimental manipulation, which is varying the ability of social cover, holding all the other mechanisms constant. How do we do this? Well, we need to fix both persuasion and anticipated persuasion across treatments. Okay. Every person saw the article. So persuasion is held fixed because you show the article to every person, right? And anticipated persuasion is also constant there because in both versions of the tweet that we asked them to post, you have the link to the article, right? So they saw the article, they know the audience will see the article. The only thing that varies is whether the tweet communicates that the respondent was exposed to the rationale before or after joining the campaign. Both things are true because they're shown the article twice, okay? So that was the trick we did here. So the experiment is basically people randomized into the cover condition or the no cover condition. The cover condition reads, I have joined the campaign to oppose defunding the police, and that's a link to joining the campaign. Before joining, I was shown this article written by a Princeton professor on the strong scientific evidence that defunding the police would increase violent crime, okay? This one is the exact same wording. We said after joining instead of before joining, I was shown this article written by a Princeton professor. It's the only difference. Everything else is held constant. You were shown the article, your audience will see it. The only difference is the audience in one case thought that you saw it before you joined, in the other case that you saw it after. That's the only manipulation we have, this one word, okay? And then just to start showing some results. This is a willingness to tweet by group, okay? So people who have the language that you saw it after you joined, 57% of them actually authorized the tweet. This is conditioned on being someone who already privately joined the campaign, okay? So 57% actually authorized the tweet. Now, if you change this one word, providing them kind of a plausible deniability or social cover, this grows to about 70%. So we have a significant increase, substantial even. And you know, if anything's a lower bound because it's just one word, if they're not paying attention, you know, they're not going to catch that. Okay, so that's the first result that we have. Of course, a bunch of issues you could say. Well, could people be more willing to schedule the cover tweet due to some mechanical effects of before or after wording? Do they think that the after wording is weird? I don't like to post this. It makes me look like I'm someone who doesn't check things and, you know, I'm not informed. So we ran a placebo experiment with identical manipulation in a non-stigmatized domain and showed that there is no mechanical effect of the wording of before and after. I'll show you in a sec. Are they also potentially more willing to schedule the cover tweet because they anticipate that the before wording will be more persuasive to followers? They say, well, this is a better tweet. I will convince more people with that. It's just a better type of tweet. I'll be more likely to post it. We showed that that's not the case with an auxiliary experiment where we ask people to predict the persuadability of the two types of tweets. We also collect direct evidence on the social cover mechanism by actually asking people in the different sample which versions of these different tweets they would choose and why. And then we just like do text analysis and hand code their open-ended answers. And we showed that a lot of people actually mention unprompted aspects of social cover. Okay, just to get a kind of an additional thing. So just to give you an example of the placebo experiment, we ran the same experiment with a separate sample. And instead of being about defunding the police, it's about conserving the Amazon rainforest, okay? With a rationale with some landmark research studies suggesting that many species are in danger of extinction. And what we find here is that we don't find that there is like a much bigger willingness to tweet when you have the cover. So it doesn't seem that there's something just mechanical going on from the wording, right? Also interesting to note that the baseline level is 83% here instead of 57. So, which indicates that indeed there could be some stigma going on, because condition on holding an opinion privately, you're much more likely to actually be willing to express it publicly here than in the other stigmatized setting. It's another way to show that there was some stigma going on there too. Okay, but here, importantly, we don't see this effect. We also ask people presented with one of the two versions of the tweet, and we ask them to guess what share of their followers will be persuaded to join the campaign if they saw the two versions. And we don't see any difference. So we don't think that they anticipate that one version of the tweet is just more persuasive toward the audience, and therefore something that should be more likely to tweet. So we don't think this is driving the results. As I said, since this is short here, there's a lot of work that was put into this on how to get people in an unprompted way to mention the reasons why they will pick a tweet over the other without making it obvious, the choice. I can discuss this during Q&As, and this because this just will take a lot of time. But we definitely need a lot of work on this with hand coding and responses, also text analysis. My co-authors like to do that kind of stuff. So just all I want to say here is that a lot of people in a completely unprompted way mentioned the social cover mechanism, and substantially more likely to have mentioned it in the cover treatment. Okay. So, but I'll leave that for later. Okay. So now the receiver side. Because our story is that the reason why this works is because the observer changes their inference about your motives and also their judgment, right? So what we did here is that we ran an experiment, again, a pre-registered experiment also last year, with about 1,000 Democrats, which we think are the people who would be judging you for opposing the defunding of the police. And each respondent was matched with a previous survey participant from the previous experiment who chose to post a tweet opposing defunding the police. And the experiment here is very simple. We showed one of the two versions of the tweet, right? The person you match with posted this or wanted to post this, or the person you matched this was willing to post this one. So one of the two, right? So that's a simple, just a screenshot, nothing else, okay? Very simple. And then we have three outcomes. One is how you judge that person, your willingness to deny a bonus payment to that participant. You're just burning money. You really don't want them to get more money, okay? So you're punishing them. Another one is an inference about their motives. So we asked them, what do you think is the probability that they donated money to this organization that helps the black cause in the US, okay? So, and then we also asked them, why do you think that person donated to that joined that campaign? So, and we use open-ended text analysis, just unprompted, right? Here's what we find. This is the willingness to deny the bonus payment. So when the other person, participant, had posted the tweet without the cover, the liberal here in this experiment, about 47% of them burned the money, don't want the other person to get the bonus payment, okay? It's not like I'm trading money for me versus money for them. It's just like, I just don't want that person to get money, okay? This number goes down to 39.7%. So we can see some movement. You know, some people start giving them more of a pass just because they have posted a tweet before posting. They were exposed to the article as opposed to after. Note that needs a lot of sophistication. To read the tweet and anticipate that the other person, was persuaded and so on, but we're still able to capture an effect here. Then when we look at the other outcome that we pre-registered, is like, what do you think is the probability that that person made a donation to a pro-black organization? The absence of the cover is pretty low, 27%, okay? Here it goes up to 34.5%. So your inference about whether that person supports black causes in the US also changes, consistent with our mechanism in mind of changing the interpretation about their motives. We also, and I'm going to skip here because it takes a lot of time and text analysis, we also show that they're much more likely, when you ask them, why do you think that person donates, they're much less likely mention words associated with opposition to racial equality or racism and tolerance, and much more likely to use words associated with concerns about crime and so on. So people seem to be shifting their inference in their minds, even in an open-ended text. Now, the availability of social cover therefore changes the willingness to public dissent, but also judgment and inference, right? Now, the interesting thing is that most Democrats actually oppose defunding the police right now, right? Yet, they don't seem to be willing to express it, right? So there's a case in which kind of vocal minorities might be shaping the debate, right? So the question is that we started getting excited about is like just how difficult it is to justify dissent in the setting. How high needs to be the bar for you to be able to say it without people thinking that, oh no, you're racist. You know, you're saying this, you're against racial equality and so on. How bar? Because we use something with very high bar, like this is pretty credible. A Princeton criminology professor in the Washington Post, which is a liberal outlet, using this strong scientific evidence. So we said, let's start to reduce the bar a little bit. Let's see when it stops working. So we reduced it just a little bit. We ran a separate experiment on the inference side where we asked people, we showed the same experiment, but we showed them two different versions here. We said, oh, that person posted this tweet saying that they joined the campaign. And we said, before joining, I was shown this article that argues that defunding the police would increase violent crime. We removed Princeton professor. We removed scientific evidence. We keep the article fixed, by the way. We just made it seem a little less scientific, a little less credible, right? And here's what we find. It doesn't work anymore. So if you're using the same Washington Post article, but you cannot, if you're not saying that it's scientific evidence by a Princeton professor, it doesn't seem people still judge you. It doesn't work anymore, okay? Both here and both in terms of beliefs about the donation to a pro-black organization. So it seems, at least based on this setting here, that the bar is very high, the liberal side. That if you want to say something that goes against kind of more the woke crowd, you better have a really good argument, a really scientific evidence, because otherwise, they're going to judge you. Yes?
No, suppose, just about framing, suppose you write it, beliefs about donation to anti-black organizations. What will happen then? Just the frame of this thing.
Yeah, no, yes. So here is we could have done that, right? This is like
I may be that there is some, supporting something and being against something will, against immigration rather than pro-immigration. So will change something?
Yeah. I mean, we haven't done that. Could be. We tried different approaches, right? We also tried the open-ended.
Maybe that it leads the name leads to your answer somehow, right? Maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't done, the belief that they're actually, yeah, could be true. We did that this way. Could have done the other way. I think the open-ended text also helps because it's unprompted, and we asked them, why do you think they made the donation? And what comes to mind is consistent with our story. But you're right. We framed this as donation to a pro-black organization. Therefore, that's why the take-up is pretty low, right?
That when you write it, you already put it out. Anti-black organizations. So people say, oh my gosh, and now suddenly they're more freer to say something.
Yeah.
Rather than
I
don't want to be the raised.
Yeah. But this was not the outcome, right? This is just your belief about whether that person made that donation, right? But that's not the outcome from the previous one, because the original experiment was actually joining a campaign against defunding the police, right? So it was already framed in your way. This is just, we did this for instance about the type. So then we also did the whole thing on the Republican side. In fact, it started like that, but then we decided, to add the liberal side. So I'll be very quick here because it's a very similar experiment. But here the outcome is we asked to tweet a petition to immediately deport all illegal Mexican immigrants. So kind of a strong stance against undocumented immigrants. And the rationale, instead of a Princeton criminology professor, we use the equivalent among Republicans, which is Tucker Carlson, okay? So the Fox News anchor with a video discussing the link between illegal immigration and crime, okay? Could be. You'll see this definitely works for conservatives. So the experiment is very similar. There's a cover condition and no cover condition. The only difference here is that instead of showing the video twice, everyone sees the video first, but everyone, and we vary whether they get, and then we ask them if they want to join the campaign. Some people get the link to the video before they join, and some people after. It's just the link. The timing of the link varies, right? So the first version says, before I joined the campaign, I received a link to this video about how illegals commit more crime. And this one, after I joined the campaign, I received a link to this video, right? I mean, both things are true. They all saw the video before, but the link was sent either before or after. So it's a way to say, to imply that they saw the video before or after, okay? And we use the Tucker Carlson video. And here's what we find. A pretty big effect of being able to evoke that you saw, that you were exposed to Tucker Carlson before you made the decision. The take-up here, without the cover, is 48%. So this condition on joining the campaign privately, 48% are willing to tweet, and this goes to 65% once they can say that they saw this video with Tucker Carlson before, right? It's a pretty big effect of being able to say that you were exposed to Tucker Carlson before making a decision. We also do, all the same types of robustness experiments, ruling out confounds and so on. We do on the side too, but I'll skip for the interest of time. And again, we do a similar inference experiment among about the participants from that experiment. So again, since we're interested in more liberal people judging conservatives for being anti-immigration, we recruited a sample of Democrats and independents, which we think are the ones who will be more judgmental against this. So the same intervention with about 1,000 participants. Each respondent was matched with the previous survey participant, and we showed the two versions, the two tweets, right? One or the other, just the screenshots. And we asked them, what's their willingness to deny bonus payment to that participant? First thing you notice, pretty high, right? This is Democrats and liberals being told that someone posted a tweet to deport all illegal Mexican immigrants. So 80% here are just like burning, I don't want that person to get a bonus payment. So clearly there's a lot of antipathy toward that person, right? It's not surprising. But we still find that it works as a cover. I mean, it's against all odds. Like, you pretty much hate that person for what they're doing. But they saw Tucker Carlson before. Maybe, just maybe, they're not a racist. Maybe they're just persuaded by Tucker Carlson. Maybe they believed it. And it works. It reduces your willingness to deny bonus payment. I was surprised because I thought these people were pretty inelastic. But we find this here, okay? And then, again, we asked them, and then your question is, I think, is even more relevant here. Instead of saying donation against immigration, we asked their beliefs about probably they donated to a pro-immigrant organization. But notice, this is pro-legal immigration. So that's different, because otherwise it would be very weird, right? But again, the baseline is pretty low, 8%. It's like, oh, that person just signed a petition to deport all illegal Mexicans, right? They're probably against immigration, but so they might be in favor of legal immigration, right? So 8%, and still we find a significant increase here in this inference. So it seems to work here on the inference side about your motives. Also seems to work. And likewise, when you use open-ended text analysis of unprompted responses, we find similar patterns of people changing the way they make inferences about the motives. So those are the two sets of experiments, the main sets of experiments on both sides of the political spectrum. I think it's interesting because we isolate this mechanism and also go deeper on kind of inference, right? How people think about the motives of the other person. Then, of course, there's some concerns. I don't know how much time I have. 10 minutes. Okay. Good. We also run experiments because, of course, some concerns, like, it's cool, you guys did this on Twitter, it's kind of a real decision and so on. But, there's issues about external validity, right? It's just not the largest samples, it's selected population, people with the survey provider that have active Twitter accounts and were willing to download the app and so on. So that imposes some selection criteria. Doesn't affect internal validity, but you can ask about external validity. So we also have the same types of experiments on the Republican side, on the conservative side, with very big samples. We actually did two. We did one, and then we replicated it. This is so close to 5,000, over 5,000 observations, so large samples throughout the country, just to show that these things really work. And there, the experiment's not on Twitter, and the outcome is instead the willingness to make a publicly observable donation to an anti-immigrant organization after being provided with a crime rationale. Here, this is actually how we started the paper back in the day, but we thought that the Twitter stuff would be much more compelling. But we have that, and instead of using Tucker Carlson, we used a study written by John Lott, arguing that immigrants commit much more crime than natives. So we use that as the cover, and we see again a significant increase in the willingness to make a donation when they have provided with a cover with a similar design. Interestingly, since they think that this is going to be observed in their area, in their city, we actually find larger effects in counties with higher Democratic vote share. So if you're a Republican living alongside Democrats, you're much more likely to need a social cover. I mean, it has a much bigger effect than if you're a Republican living alongside Republicans. Of course, it's not random assignment, but it's consistent with the idea that I need a cover if I'm dealing with Democrats or independents. But if I'm around other fellow Republicans, I might not need the cover so much. Again, we also run the additional inference experiment with a large sample of 3,000 Democrats, and we find very similar result on people shifting how the inference they make about the motives of the other person. So we are able to replicate this again and again with different types of samples, which gives us kind of confidence that we're actually getting what we think we're getting. Okay. So I actually have time to discuss some of the implications and kind of next steps. So we showed here the rationales facilitate dissent, that respondents on both sides of the political spectrum are more willing to express dissent when they can appeal to a rationale. Okay, so holding fixed whether they are exposed to the rationale and whether they think the audience will be exposed, just the fact that they can evoke the rationale, they can say, oh, I saw this, actually seems to matter a bunch. These rationales also change social inferences about the motives behind dissenting. People impose lower social sanctions on dissenters and are less likely to ascribe their behavior to stigmatized motives when dissenters can appeal to a credible rationale. Okay, so this is what we see on both sides of the political spectrum. Now, I think there's kind of some interesting implications. For example, when you think about political correctness and in discussion of political correctness, the idea is that certain arguments or rationales cannot be voiced because they might legitimize dangerous or undesirable causes. So you basically make it like such that anyone who voices it is seen as supporting the cause. So just kind of to silence a group. So how you do it, right? And so in this case, you could be in a situation where rationales actually fail to shift the inference and they can actually backfire, which is like, oh yeah, I know why you're saying this. I know why you're using this evidence. It's because really you are a racist. That's why you're saying this. This is an excuse. You're using that. So that's something that can happen, right? So individuals or institutions seeking to suppress dissent can therefore, one, they can undermine the credibility of rationales directly by saying anyone who evokes this has an agenda behind it. This is kind of not a very credible rationale. You shouldn't use it, right? So that's one way to remove this power of the rationale to facilitate dissent. Another thing that can be done is to manipulate the real, the perceived correlation between the knowledge, the rationale, and the underlying type, which I think is kind of pretty interesting, right? Because in our experiment, this is not something we're manipulating because people say, I was shown the article, right? There's no treatment where you say, I found the article, right? So it could be interesting if when you say that you found, it works less well because it, oh yeah, you found it. What were you looking for, right? So the inference about your type could be different if instead of being exposed to the article, you actually found it. And people can use this, like institutions and individuals can actually say, well, if someone looks for that, if someone finds these type of sources, it must be that they are of this bad type. Okay, so that's something that can be used also to shift on silence groups, right? So I think there's kind of some interesting kind of extensions, both theoretically and also experimentally to be studied. And then one potential, say, just to think about some implications, like when you think about debunking fake news, right? It might not be enough. If part of the reason why people are using stories is to provide them with social cover, then it might not be enough. Suppose you want to post something on social media, and it's kind of not reliable, the source. It's fake or whatever. And then Facebook sends you a little message, say, be careful, this has been challenged, don't post it. If they send it privately, it might not be enough because the audience doesn't know that you know that it's not legit, right? You could say, well, I posted, oh, I just didn't know, right? Now, it might be crucial to tell the person that it's going to be common knowledge among your followers that you were debunked, to remove the social cover, right? So it might not be enough to just do it privately. You might say, hey, we're telling you, and your followers will know that you were told, right? You might need this additional step. So, so we've been in touch with both Twitter and Facebook to tweak their kind of like fact-checking approach to actually add this aspect of, of common knowledge, to see if they can do it. Because the general equilibrium effect of debunking could be much larger than the partial equilibrium effect, because, through this common knowledge aspect, yeah. And they're just like publicly. Yeah, I saw in which elections. A lot of the what happens now is still also with just like getting you like a little warning before you post, right? Without emphasizing that, yes, your followers will know that you've been, are you sure you want to post this because it's been challenged? But you could say, hey, and your followers will know that we gave you this heads up, right? They don't have this additional step. Yeah. So, all right. So that's it. Thank you.
So, are there any questions?
A quick one, out of curiosity. So did the cover tweets get more likes or retweets as well?
That's the thing. They were not posted.
It was all the screenshot that you were showing to this other.
Exactly, because.
Then it's not quite the public forum I was thinking of when you were.
No. We told them, I don't know, maybe I was too quick. Said, we tell them, we have access to the Twitter account through this app, and we say, do you authorize us to post this on your account? We'll do it if and when we reach
all the counties.
Yes. And since we never did it, we never posted. But at that moment, they thought
they knew that they were going to be
they
go public.
Yes, they thought, but we just there. It's interesting. I mean, there's also this aspect of the social multiplier that unfortunately we're not studying here, which is like, you silence the person and then you silence the next one and so on. But we couldn't measure all these additional steps because we're not actually posting. So we're walking this line between, the ethics, and kind of the interesting aspect.
Oh, no, very cool. Thank you.
Yes.
What share of people who were exposed to the videos decided to join the campaign? I mean, was it larger for liberals on the more conservative?
It's the other way around. So they joined the campaign. So privately joining the campaign happens before seeing the article, right? So this condition on seeing the article, right? And then I think it's about half conditional on seeing actually join without the cover. About half, 40-something and 50-something. Yeah, on both sides. That's about. Okay.
In terms of the implications, is there anything to be done here in terms of regulation of Twitters or the social media? What do you learn from this exercise in the end? So it's interesting, It's
yeah, I mean, the debunking of fake news is one, right? The other one is about this aspect of how institutions, like what institutions, individuals, or groups can do to kind of suppress or silence a group by basically challenging the credibility of rationales or implying that finding a rationale says something about you. It kind of informs us on the strategies that groups can do, right? So I think those are some things we learned. And it's interesting too that if the reason why people are silenced is because they can't initially kind of express their views without justification, then you want to make sure there's actually no credible justification people can use, right? One might be enough to just trigger a whole movement, right? So it's kind of interesting. You really want to make sure every corner is kind of cut, because otherwise if people agree that, oh, this is valid, we can all use it, and then you can start a whole campaign, a whole movement, and things can unravel. But there's some interesting dynamic implications in terms of political economy, I think. Yeah.
Good question. Maybe I misunderstood it. So to try to isolate this mechanism from sort of a more just pure identity-based mechanism, if it was Hillary Clinton as opposed to Tucker Carlson saying that immigrants are horrible and they should all be sent back. In your story, that should lead to a bigger effect, no?
Depends. Yeah, it could be, right? I agree. It could be that, there's no reason. First of all, for the second one, you mean? First of all, it would be weird to say, why is she saying that?
No, but that's my point. Yeah.
Yeah. And the question is, would you actually believe that? But the interesting thing, notice the lack of symmetry here. We did not try to lower the bar on the Republican side, right? And that's kind of interesting because Tucker Carlson works pretty well, right? We saw that on the Democrat side, an opinion piece in the Washington Post, without saying that it's a Princeton professor with scientific evidence on the tweet already doesn't work. Now, the Republican side will be interesting to see, okay, could it be that evoking scientific evidence actually flips, it makes it worse? Or, or citing a Democratic candidate? Those are interesting questions.
Yeah, something at the intended margin would be very nice.
Will be interesting, to study, I agree. Well, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.